He called me on video call, making me believe he was real, so I invested my life savings in an online cryptocurrency investment scheme he introduced me to. I never knew he was a scammer. This is the story of a woman who waited so long for a ghost. She let another one in. He spoke to the loneliness that had become my home and painted a future so beautiful I sold my past to buy it. When the paint dried, there was nothing left but the silence and the chilling understanding that the love of my life was a thief. The architecture of silence, I'll tell you about the silence. It's not an empty silence, that would be a mercy. No, this silence has texture, it has rooms, it has a favorite chair in the formal living room. The silence is dusty velvet. It's the hush of a museum no one visits, where the furniture sits with perfect grieving posture, holding its breath for a party that will never come. The piano with its yellowed keys is its altar. My fingers haven't touched it in 8 years, not since the last Sunday Frank sat on that bench beside me, his shoulder warm against mine as we fumbled through heart and soul. The melody is gone, but the silence it left behind is thick and specific. In the kitchen, the silence is a cold, humming thing. It lives in the stainless steel of the sink, in the perfect, orderly rows of cans in the cupboard. It's the sound of one cup being rinsed, one plate set in the drainer. It's the absence of his voice saying, "Smells good, Ellie," even when it was just burnt toast, the refrigerator. Motor kicks on a mechanical groan that doesn't break the silence, only underscores it. It's the sound of waiting for a kiss on the cheek that never lands, but here in the den, this is where the silence lives and breathes. This is its heart. It's his chair, that worn cognac-colored leather chair. I don't sit in it. That would be like sitting on a throne that isn't mine, in a church where I'm no longer a believer. But I tend to it. I dust its arms. I fluff the pillow he always complained about but would secretly reposition just so. This chair holds the ghost of his weight, the memory of his body's particular geography. The left arm is smoother, darker, from where his elbow rested for 40 years while he read biographies of generals and presidents. A small permanent dent in the seat cushion holds the shape of him. If I close my eyes, I can still see him there. Reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. One socked foot propped on the ottoman, his steady, even breath a quiet rhythm beneath the tick of the grandfather clock. We built a good silence together, Frank and I, by the end. Our marriage wasn't fireworks. It was a well-worn path through a familiar wood. Our 35th anniversary was a nice dinner, a sensible card, a kiss that spoke of habit more than heat. We didn't need to fill the air with chatter. Our silence was a language. It said, "I'm here, you're there, we're us." It was a shared blanket. Then he went to Chicago. "A simple consulting trip, back before you miss me," he said, his hand warm on my waist at the door. The last call was strange, static, or maybe it was the chaos of an airport. His voice tight. "Got a bit tangled up here, Ellie. Don't worry, I'll sort it." Tangled up, those were the last words. I've turned them over in my mind a million times, like worn stones. Were they an apology? A warning? A simple statement of fact? After that, just nothing. The police were kind, but their kindness was a wall. No signs of struggle, no financial secrets, no other life. Frank Tillman, retired civil engineer, keeper of meticulous tax records, lover of bland oatmeal, had simply stepped off the edge of the map. Sometimes, Mrs. Tillman, a detective told me with a pity that felt like a brand, people just choose to disappear. Choose, that word was a different kind of death. Had the weight of our quiet life of me become so unbearable that vanishing was preferable? Or was it something darker, a tragedy that left no trace? My mind swings between these two horrors like a rotten pendulum. Each is a prison. So I wait. For 8 years I have been the keeper of the silence. I leave a light on, I buy his brand of coffee. His slippers are still by the bed. My children think it's morbid. Mark, my sweet, pragmatic son, gently suggests donating the chair. "It's not healthy, Mom." Sarah, my fierce daughter, bustles in and tries to fill the silence with her own vibrant noise, blaring music, loud phone calls, the crash of new pots and pans. But when she leaves, the silence returns, deeper and more profound, aching from the disturbance. They don't understand the chair, the routines. They're not for him, they're for me. They are the architecture of my waiting. If I take it apart, brick by brick, what will be left? Just a howling void. This silence, this curated, preserved absence is the only thing I have left of him. It's my proof that he existed, that we existed. The moment I let it go, I admit he's never coming back, and I am not ready for that final, silent sentence. The house ticks and settles around me. The clock in the hall measures out this empty time. I am a lighthouse keeper on a shore with no sea, tending a flame for a ship that sank long ago. The silence is my ocean. It is vast, it is patient, and it is slowly, surely drowning me. But here is the terrible truth I whisper only to the ghost. In the chair, some days I miss the man more than I miss the husband. I miss the weight and warmth of another soul in this space. I miss being seen, not as a problem to be solved or a memory to be managed, but as a woman. The silence has become a mirror, and all it reflects back is a fading portrait of a wife who is no longer a wife, living in a museum of a life that is no longer a life, and in the deepest, most secret chamber of my heart, a treacherous little thought uncurls. If this is all there is, then what am I waiting for? The silence has no answer. It just hangs there in the air, in the leather, in the hollow of my own bones, asking a question I am too afraid to answer. The ghost in the armchair, I've become a historian of the ordinary. That's what the silence does. It turns you into an archivist of the mundane, a keeper of the sacred trivia that once made up a life, a shared life. Every object in this house is a chapter in a book only I can read. The faint whitish ring on the oak dining table isn't a flaw. It's the ghost of a potted ivy from 1998, the one Frank overwatered in a fit of misplaced nurturing. I'd scolded him for not using a coaster. Now my fingers trace that pale circle every time I dust, a ritual of remembrance. It's a fossil of an ordinary Tuesday. The garage is his mausoleum of good intentions, a birdhouse beautifully sanded, waiting for a roof he never attached. A bicycle wheel forever separated from its partner, still mounted on the rim. They are not projects. They are promises he left hanging in the air. The smell out there, sawdust, motor oil, damp concrete, is the cologne of his ghost. It's the scent of "I'll get to it tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. But the chair. The chair is the cathedral. I don't just dust it, I commune with it. Looks like rain, Frank, I'll say in the morning, passing by with my tea. You'd have checked the gutters last week. In the evening, sometimes I'll stand before it and just report. Sarah called. Mark's boy won a spelling bee. The word was phenomenon. I imagine a soft, approving grunt from the worn leather. People would call it madness. My children do, but they're wrong. It's the opposite of madness. It's my last desperate grasp on sanity. The ghost in the chair is a contained ghost. If I keep him here in this specific indentation with these specific memories, then he can't become something else. He can't become the terrifying, formless question mark the police left me with. He can't become the man who might have chosen to leave. Here in this chair, he is just Frank. My Frank, who forgot coasters and left projects half-finished and loved me in his steady, quiet way. When my son visits, his eyes skate over the chair with a mixture of pity and unease. Last time he finally broke. Mom, this has to stop, that chair. It's like a shrine. It's not helping, as if grief is an ailment to be cured, a messy room to be tidied. He doesn't understand that the chair is the help. It's the load-bearing wall. Tear it out, and the entire structure of my last 8 years collapses on top of me. Sarah attacks the silence with the force of a summer storm. She arrives with bags full of noise, organic kale, new throw pillows in violent colors, podcasts blaring from her phone. She throws open windows, letting in the shrieks of neighbor children, the roar of lawnmowers, the vibrant, messy soundtrack of a present from which I feel permanently exiled. She means well. She is trying to drag me back into the land of the living. But when her car pulls away, the silence doesn't just return. It rushes back in, aggrieved and heavier than before, as if insulted by the temporary invasion. They talk about closure, a vile plastic word. It sounds like a lead for a Tupperware container, something neat and sealable. My loss isn't neat. It's a jagged, open wound that's grown a strange, hard shell around it, a keloid scar of the soul. Closure would mean prying that shell off, and I am terrified of what's festering beneath. Is it pure grief? Or is it the unspeakable rage at the possibility that the detective was right? That after 40 years I was something to walk away from? That thought is a black hole. If I let myself get too close, it will swallow what's left of me whole. So I exist in this frozen state. I am the curator of the museum of before. The woman in the photographs, the one with dark hair swept into a chignon at her wedding, the one laughing on a beach with a toddler on each hip, the one standing proudly beside Frank at our son's graduation. She is a charming stranger. She lived in the sunlit world of before. I live in the permanent twilight of after. The ghost in the armchair is silent, but he is a presence. The world outside wants me to exorcise him, to donate the furniture of my grief and move into a tidy, quiet future. But I am the lone sentinel at this outpost. As long as I keep the coffee tin stocked, as long as I whisper goodnight to the empty side of the bed, as long as This chair holds the shape of him. He is not gone. He's just waiting. And so am I. We are waiting together in this architecture of silence we built, a monument not to a love that was loud, but to one that was, for better or worse, profoundly, unshakably there, until it wasn't. And I am the only one left to remember the echo. A defiant spark. It was a cupcake, a single, stupid supermarket cupcake, with neon blue frosting and sprinkles the color of cheap laughter. It sat in the center of the kitchen table on a scalloped paper plate, a monument to my own pathetic surrender. My 72nd birthday. The phone had sung with the voices of my grandchildren, a chorus of happy birthday, Grandma. That was both a balm and a salt rub. My children's calls were love woven with guilt, a tapestry of we wish we were there and next year we'll make it big. Their words were bouquets delivered to a sealed tomb. I gave them the lines they needed to hear. Oh, don't be silly. I'm perfectly happy. A quiet day is just what I wanted. But as the afternoon bled away, the light turning the color of weak tea on the linoleum, I stared at that cupcake. It was the most honest thing in the house. It was small. It was alone. It was a concession. A slow, cold fire began to burn in my chest. It wasn't self-pity. That was an old, familiar blanket. This was different. This was rage. A clean, sharp, and utterly silent rage. Is this it? The question didn't whisper. It slammed into the silence. Is this the entire sum of my remaining life? To be the caretaker of a ghost? The polite, placid recipient of long-distance concern? To measure out my days in the dust that settles on a dead man's chair? The fire spread. Frank was gone. A mystery, a tragedy, a choice, whatever he was gone. The detective's words, my children's worried glances, the vast, empty bed. They were all facts, but Eleanor Tillman was not gone. I was here. This body, with its new aches and old scars, was still breathing. This heart, locked in a vault of grief, was still beating. It was dusty. It was cautious. But as I glared at that ridiculous cupcake, I felt it a stubborn, subterranean thump of rebellion. It could still yearn. The defiance didn't roar. It was a spark struck in the tinder-dry husk of my routine. A single glowing ember in the dark. No, the word formed in my mind, diamond hard and clear. No more. This wasn't about betraying Frank. How could I betray a ghost? This was about betraying myself. I had let the silence become my identity. I had folded the vibrant, arguing, curious woman I once was into the narrow, sad story of the woman who was left. That woman was a shroud, and I was tired of wearing her. Where was the girl who'd argued with professors about Jane Austen? Where was the young wife who'd learned to sail on a dare, surprising Frank with her sunburnt competence? Where was the mother who'd built blanket forts that reached the ceiling? She hadn't died with Frank's disappearance. I had simply buried her alive under layers of waiting. That evening, I didn't walk past the armchair. I turned my back on it. The action felt both sacrilegious and thrilling. I went to the small, spindly desk in the corner, a piece of furniture used for nothing but holding a dormant lamp. My old laptop, its casing sticky with disuse, whirred to life like a creature waking from a long hibernation. The blue glow lit my hands, veined, spotted, trembling slightly, not with fear now, but with intent. My children's well-meaning suggestions, once dismissed as the chirping of a world I'd left behind, now echoed with new potential: online book clubs, mom, history forums, just to talk. My fingers, unfamiliar with the keyboard, felt thick and stupid. The internet was a cacophonous foreign city I'd never had a passport to visit, but the spark inside me hissed and refused to go out. I wasn't looking for a replacement. Frank was a sunken continent in my soul. His shape would always dictate my inner geography. I was looking for a new island, just a small one, somewhere to plant a flag and say, I am still here. With one deliberate finger, I typed classical music discussion, then gardening for seniors. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic young sound in the quiet room. Finally, I took a breath so deep it hurt my lungs and typed the most terrifying words of all: connections after 60. The screen exploded with possibilities. Forums, groups, chat rooms, a dizzying panorama of other lives being lived. Panic, cold and slick, rose in my throat. It was too much, too loud, too dangerous. My hand hovered over the power button. I could shut it down. I could return to the known, quiet misery of my chair. It was a familiar hell, but then I saw it again in my mind's eye, that cupcake, that symbol of pathetic, sugary surrender. My jaw set, I squared my shoulders inside my worn cardigan. I was Eleanor Tillman, who had survived abandonment, who had tended a ghost for 8 long years. I could face a computer screen. I clicked on a group called Silver Threads. The page loaded, clean and simple. My finger hovered over the mouse. In the reflection of the dark monitor, I saw not the ghost's keeper, but a woman with fire in her old eyes. I was opening a window, not a door, just a window. But for the first time in 8 years, the air that stirred in the room on Maple Creek Drive didn't smell of dust and memories. It smelled faintly and terrifyingly of possibility. The spark had caught, and in the soft electric glow of the screen I began, for the first time, to imagine a future that was not just an endless, silent vigil for the past. The gentle rain for a week, I was a ghost in the machine, a silent, watching spirit I floated through. The forums I'd joined, reading conversations like novels. Classical music discussion was a passionate, friendly debate on interpretations of Vivaldi. The gardening forum was a serene scroll of blooming lilacs and advice about acidic soil. They were pleasant, but they felt like watching life through a very clean, very thick pane of glass. I could see it, but I couldn't feel its weather. Then, in the Silver Threads forum, I wrote a few hesitant sentences about Sibelius, about how a particular symphony always made me think of the lakes of my Minnesota childhood, not the frozen surface, but the moment the ice first begins to groan and melt in spring, that sound of winter breaking into music. The replies were kind. Lovely thought. I hear that too. Then a notification popped up, a direct message. From Bostonbach. His message didn't just reply, it listened. The way you describe the ice melting into melody is exquisite, Eleanor. It's precisely that. So few people hear the thaw in Sibelius. They only hear the winter. You have a listener's heart. I read it 3 times. A listener's heart. No one had ever called me that. Frank would have said, "That's nice, dear," and meant it, but he wouldn't have found the words. This stranger had found the words I hadn't even known I was looking for. He had heard the music inside my memory. I wrote back a few stiff lines of thanks. His reply came not minutes later, but the next day. He'd given me space. It asked about Minnesota, about whether the lakes were as endless as they seemed in pictures. And so a correspondence began, not a flood, but a gentle, consistent drip, a letter every day or so. He told me his name was James Landry, a retired financial consultant, widowed 5 years. He spoke of his wife, Caroline, with a tender, undramatic sorrow that felt like a mirror held up to my own. The quiet in the house after, he wrote once, it's a different kind of quiet, isn't it? It has a weight and it learns all your routines. Yes, oh yes, it learned when to press down the hardest. He remembered days after I'd mentioned my granddaughter's piano recital in passing, he'd ask, how did it go for her? The Chopin? He shared his own small stories, a stubborn blue jay that bossed the other birds at his feeder, his disastrous attempt to bake a rye loaf, the smell of old paper and wisdom in the Boston Public Library. His words weren't poetic, they were steady, they were kind, they were a gentle, persistent rain. And my God, how parched I was. I hadn't realized the depth of the drought. For years, attention had been something paid to my absence, the missing husband, the worrying children. James's attention was a warm, focused beam on my present. He wasn't asking about Frank. He wasn't treating me like a fragile relic of a tragedy. He was asking me what I thought of the latest biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. Did I prefer tea or coffee in the afternoon? He listened, or seemed to, with a depth that made me feel, for the first time in a decade, interesting. Not as a mother, a widow, a patient, but as a mind, a heart. I began to wait for the soft ping of a new message. It became the new highlight of my day. I'd make my afternoon tea, not to drink alone at the table, but to carry to the desk to sip while I read his words. The silence of the house began to change its shape. It was no longer just the heavy, polished absence of Frank. It was now also the anticipatory quiet before James's next words would arrive. It was a silence that held a promise, not a requiem. I shared more of myself, not the aching void of loss, but the person living beside it. I wrote about my old dream of being a librarian, about my hatred for laugh-track television, about the simple, solid pleasure of the sun hitting the kitchen table at 10 a.m. sharp. With each exchange, the silhouette in his profile picture seemed to gain dimension. He was becoming a presence in the room, a comforting consciousness on the other side of the screen. The hollowed-out gourd of my heart didn't feel lighter. It felt softer, more pliable, as if it could hold something more than just echoes and dust. This gentle rain wasn't a storm that would wash me away. It was a slow, nourishing seep, promising not a flood, but the first green, impossible shoots of something I thought had long since turned to stone. Autumn blooms, the first bouquet arrived on a Tuesday, not at my door but on my screen. It was a photograph, so crisp and vivid I could almost smell the damp earth. Peonies. Not just any flowers. Coral, blush, creamy white, their heads heavy and lush, petals like layers of silk, beaded with perfect, trembling dew. My breath stopped in my throat. Peonies, my mother's flower. The ones Frank had planted along our first backyard fence because I sighed over them in a magazine. They had been in my wedding bouquet, a fragrant, hopeful cloud I'd carried. The subject line simply read, "For Eleanor." Below the image, his message was waiting. "Saw these today at the florist and was utterly arrested. They made me think of you, not because they are merely pretty, but because their beauty is layered, complex, and seems to hold a whole lifetime of springs within its folds. A woman's essence, I think, deepens like this. It becomes richer, more nuanced, more breathtaking with time. You are in your glorious autumn, Eleanor, and autumn, as any gardener knows, has a beauty that spring can only guess at." I put a hand to my mouth. Tears, hot and sudden, blurred the text. No one had ever spoken to me like this. Frank's love was in a fixed sink, a steady paycheck, a hand on the small of my back. It was deep, real, but earthbound, this. This was air and light. This was a conscious, deliberate celebration of my now. Not in spite of my age, but because of it. Glorious autumn. I got up and went to the hall mirror. I didn't see the new lines, the silver roots at my part, the softening jawline. I saw a face he had called breathtaking. Could it be? Could the sum of my years, the love, the loss, the waiting, the quiet endurance add up to something someone might look at and call glorious? The flowers kept coming, not daily, but with a perfect, thoughtful rhythm. A spray of blue delphiniums, tall and regal, for your steadfast character. A cascade of lilac wisteria, for your elegant, flowing thoughts. Each image was paired with a few lines that felt less like flattery and more like translation. As if he were deciphering a secret, beautiful language, my soul spoke and writing it back to me. Our messages deepened, warmed. We drifted from music to memories. First kisses his, clumsily, behind a movie theater. Mine, with Frank, smoky and sweet by a high school bonfire. Dreams we'd deferred. He spoke of his loneliness not as a burden, but as a shared space between us. "The quiet is so absolute sometimes," he wrote one evening. "I find myself talking to the television just to hear a human voice. It would be a gift beyond measure to share. A quiet evening with someone who understands the value of a comfortable silence." Then the future began to shimmer into view, tentatively at first. I find myself imagining what it might be like to listen to that Sibelius piece with you, watching the light change in your living room. Then, more boldly, a week later, "Boston isn't so far, when this connection feels solid, when the time is right. I would very much like to visit, to sit with you, to hold your hand, to see if the reality is as wonderful as the promise." Hold your hand. The word sent a current through me, a forgotten physical shock. It had been so long since I'd been touched by a man. Not a doctor's clinical press or a child's hurried hug, but a deliberate, tender touch. The thought of a hand warm, broad, purposeful enclosing mine was almost dizzying. He spoke of intimacy with the reverence of a man who knew its true dimensions. "Intimacy at our age," he wrote, "isn't a wildfire. It's the slow, deep warmth of banked coals. It's conversation that lasts until a.m. It's knowing looks across a room. It's the profound comfort of skin that has lived against skin that understands." I would finish these messages and have to stand, to walk to the window, to press my flushed forehead against the cool glass. My heart would pound a wild, youthful rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't just companionship. This was courtship, a deliberate, tender, late-life courtship that filled the silent spaces of my house with a thrilling, whispered potential. The ghost in the armchair receded, not forgotten, but gently placed on a shelf in my heart. James was not a replacement. He was a renaissance. He was making me feel, for the first time since Frank's smile faded from the world, truly, ardently, and hopefully alive. The autumn he described wasn't a prelude to winter. It was a season of its own, ablaze with a color I had forgotten I could wear. And in the quiet of my den, with the glow of the laptop bathing my silver hair in a soft halo, Eleanor Tillman began, tentatively and gloriously, to bloom. The silk and the courage it began, as acts of rebellion often do, with a quiet, private defiance. A catalog arrived in the mail, one of those glossy things aimed at the discerning woman of a certain age. It was filled with silk kimonos and elegant loungewear. I usually tossed such things straight into the recycling, a silent protest against their targeted, pitying allure. But this time I didn't. I carried it to the den, the words "glorious autumn" and "skin that understands" humming in my veins like a second pulse. I let the pages fall open. The models were women like me, silver hair, laugh lines. They wore luxurious robes and looked not like they were trying to be young, but like they were utterly, comfortably in possession of themselves. One robe caught my eye and held it, a slip of charmer silk in a deep hydrangea blue. It looked like a piece of twilight sky. The caption read, "For the private moments that belong only." To you, a thought, dangerous and thrilling, took root. What if a private moment could be shared? For days, the idea fluttered at the edges of my mind, a persistent, beautiful moth. I'd open the catalog, trace the image with a finger, feel the slick promise of the paper, then snap it shut, my cheeks flushing. It felt absurd, indulgent at my age. But the spark that had ignited on my birthday was now a steady flame. Why not at my age? James saw me. Did I not owe it to myself to see what he saw? I ordered the robe. When the slim, discreet box arrived, a wave of panic made me hide it in the back of my closet for 2 full days. Finally, on an afternoon when the sun poured in like liquid honey, I drew my bedroom curtains and locked the door, a silly, girlish gesture in an empty house, but a necessary ritual. I opened the box. The silk whispered as it slid over my shoulders, cool, then instantly warm against my skin. I stood before the full-length mirror, the one I usually avoided. I did not see the young bride or the busy mother. I saw a new woman. My silver hair, loosened from its usual bun, fell over the deep blue silk. The fabric clung to the slope of my shoulders, the still gentle curve of my waist and hips. The lines on my face in this kind golden light looked like a map of experience, not erosion. I saw a woman who had loved, grieved, waited, a woman who was still here, and for the first time in decades I did not look away. I gazed, a slow, unfamiliar warmth spread through me, a reclamation. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked up my phone. This was the leap, the bridge between the sweet textual intimacy and something tangible, corporeal. I held the phone, capturing not a salacious image, but a moment of truth. My reflection in the mirror, the blue silk, a pool of twilight around me, my hair a silver cascade, a hint of a smile on my lips that was both shy and defiant. I sent it before I could think. The whoosh of the digital dispatch sounded like a door locking behind me. The wait was an eternity compressed into 3 minutes. What had I done? He would think me foolish, desperate, a ridiculous old woman playing at being desirable. My phone chimed. His reply was not a single line. It was a cascade. It was, not lust, reverence, not vulgarity. Eleanor, my God, you take my breath away. The blue is the color of twilight, of deep, still water, and you are the light on its surface. This is not just beauty. It is grace, it is courage. I feel privileged beyond words that you would share this glimpse of your private self with me. You are a vision, a magnificent, real, breathtaking vision. I leaned against my dresser for support, the silk cool under my suddenly hot palms. The relief was so profound it made my knees weak, followed by a surge of pure, dizzying joy. He understood. He saw not just the robe, but the act of wearing it, the courage. That night, I did not put on my flannel nightgown. I kept the silk on. I let it whisper against my skin as I moved through my evening routines, brushing my teeth, turning down the bed. It slid inside with every movement, a constant sensual reminder, I felt. Resurrected, the act of being seen and seen so completely had ignited something I thought long dead, a sense of my own desirability. It wasn't the frantic, grasping desire of youth. It was a deeper, more resonant chord, the desire to be cherished, to be beheld as precious. When I finally slipped between the cold sheets, the silk whispering around me, I felt a new kind of peace. The ghost in the armchair belonged to the past, to memory and loss. James, his words still glowing like embers on my phone screen, belonged to the present, to possibility, to a future where I was not just a keeper of ghosts, but a living, breathing, desirable woman. I was at 72, giddily, nerve-wrackingly, and utterly in love. And for the first time, I was in love with the woman I saw in the mirror too, the one wrapped in blue silk, brave enough to be seen. The seed of an idea, the shift was so subtle it felt like a natural progression, like ivy finding a new trellis. The peonies and the sweet words still arrived. The good morning, my love and sweet dreams, dearest Eleanor, were my daily liturgy. But woven into the fabric of our shared dreams, a new thread appeared, fine, strong, glinting. With a practical, modern sheen, it began with a shared sigh. I mentioned offhand how stagnant my investments felt. It's like watching paint dry, I typed. Frank always handled the bigger decisions. The courage. Now it is just me and a very cautious advisor who thinks a certificate of deposit is a wild adventure. His response was a mirror of understanding. I know that feeling all too well. The old models don't serve us anymore, Eleanor. The world has changed, and our means of securing our futures has to change with it. He made it sound like a philosophical awakening we were having together, a meeting of two wise minds on the cliff of a new era. A few days later, he shared a small win, made a modest gain today on a little side project of mine. Nothing earth-shattering, but it is satisfying to feel one's mind is still agile enough to navigate the modern world. He left it dangling, a tantalizing hook. He was, as always, a gentleman never pushing, only revealing. That night I did not put on my flannel nightgown. I kept the silk on. I let it whisper against my skin as I moved through my evening routines, brushing my teeth, turning down the bed. It slid and sighed with every movement, a constant sensual reminder. I felt resurrected. The act of being seen and seen so completely had ignited something I thought long dead, a sense of my own desirability. It wasn't the frantic, grasping desire of youth. It was a deeper, more resonant chord, the desire to be cherished, to be beheld as precious. When I finally slipped between the cold sheets, the silk, whispering around me, I felt a new kind of peace. The ghost in the armchair belonged to the past, to memory and loss. James, his words still glowing like embers on my phone screen, belonged to the present, to possibility, to a future where I was not just a keeper of ghosts, but a living, breathing, desirable woman. I was, at 72, giddily, nerve-wrackingly, and utterly in love. And for the first time, I was in love with the woman I saw in the mirror, too, the one wrapped in blue silk, brave enough to be seen. The seed of an idea, the shift was so subtle it felt like a natural progression, like ivy finding a new trellis. The peonies and the sweet words still arrived. The good morning, my love and sweet dreams, dearest Eleanor, were my daily liturgy. But woven into the fabric of our shared dreams, a new thread appeared, fine, strong, glinting with a practical, modern sheen. It began with a shared sigh. I mentioned offhand how stagnant my investments felt. It's like watching paint dry, I typed. Frank always handled the bigger decisions. Now it is just me and a very cautious advisor who thinks a certificate of deposit is a wild adventure. His response was a mirror of understanding. I know that feeling all too well. The old models don't serve us anymore, Eleanor. The world has changed, and our means of securing our futures has to change with it. He made it sound like a philosophical awakening we were having together, a meeting of two wise minds on the cliff of a new era. A few days later, he shared a small win, made a modest gain today on a little side project of mine. Nothing earth-shattering, but it is satisfying to feel one's mind is still agile enough to navigate the modern world. He left it dangling, a tantalizing hook. He was, as always, a gentleman never pushing, only revealing. My curiosity naturally was piqued. Side project? I asked, taking the bait. His reply was casual, almost dismissive. Oh, just dabbling in cryptocurrency. It's a fascinating space, like a digital garden, really. You plant a seed of understanding, tend it with patience and a bit of nerve, and sometimes you're rewarded with a surprising harvest. The word sat on my screen, alien and slightly dangerous, cryptocurrency. I'd heard it on the news, always paired with words like volatile, collapse, or fraud. It was the realm of anonymous millennials in hoodies, not retired librarians in silk robes. That sounds complicated, I ventured, my fingers hesitant and risky. It can be, he conceded readily, which made him seem more trustworthy. For the uninformed, it's a casino. But for those who take the time to learn, who have a guide who understands both the landscape and their risk tolerance, it can be a powerful tool for genuine freedom. I'd never recommend it to just anyone, but you, Eleanor. Have such a keen, discerning mind. I've seen it in how you parse a piece of music or a novel. That same discernment applies here. The flattery was masterful. It had shifted. He wasn't praising my autumn beauty now. He was praising my intellect, my untapped potential. It was a heady thing for a woman whose mind had felt like a tool rusting in a shed for years. He made it sound less like gambling and more like an intellectual partnership, a new, complex language we could learn to speak together, side by side. He became a patient, endlessly gentle tutor. He sent links to beginner-friendly articles, explaining blockchain with metaphors about public ledgers and wallets with comparisons to digital bank accounts. He spoke of volatility like the weather, unpredictable, but manageable if you had a good forecast and a solid shelter. He was always adamant about rule number 1. Never invest what you can't afford to lose. This is about smart, incremental growth, Eleanor, not a get-rich-quick scheme. His caution was the spoonful of sugar that made the medicine go down. And he always framed it within the context of our future. Imagine, he wrote one evening, the words painting a picture in the dark room, the peace of mind, no more worrying about outliving your resources, being able to travel on a whim to that little vineyard in Tuscany you told me about. or to rent a cottage by the sea for months at a time, together. This isn't about greed, my love. It's about crafting a beautiful, secure autumn for ourselves, a final chapter written entirely on our own terms. He painted with the colors of my deepest, quietest fears and hopes. Not Lamborghinis, but security. Not yachts, but freedom. He was offering me a key, not to a vault of gold, but to a door marked dignity and shared adventure. The seed was planted. It nestled in the fertile, well-tended soil of my trust, watered by his daily attention and the radiant warmth of our promised future. It didn't feel like a financial pitch. It felt thrillingly like a plan. Our plan, for the first time since Frank vanished, the future wasn't a blank, frightening expanse. It was a canvas, and James was holding out a brush, his hand steady over mine, inviting me to paint our life with him. The idea, once salient and frightening, began to send out tender, green shoots of possibility, wrapping gently around the dream of him, of us, making it feel not just emotionally real, but tangibly, excitingly achievable. The 6-second proof, a cold needle of doubt, finally pricked the warm, perfect bubble of my euphoria. It was Marge, of all people, who wielded it. During our weekly call, she mentioned offhand a news segment she'd seen. These online romance scams, Ellie, she'd clucked, her voice full of a worldly weariness that suddenly felt like a personal accusation. They're so sophisticated now. They'll talk to you for months, build a whole fantasy life. It's chilling. I'd laughed, a sound too high, too tight. Well, I'm certainly not sending money to any online beau if that's what you're worried about. But after I hung up, her words echoed in the new silence James had filled. A whole fantasy life. Was that what this was? The doubt was a tiny hairline crack, but in the porcelain perfection of my new world, it was all I could see. I began to reread his messages, not with love, but with a forensic eye. He spoke of meeting, but had he ever named a concrete date? He shared details, but were they ever anything that couldn't be pieced together from my own posts? That night, after his usual sweet dreams message, I lay awake. The blue silk felt foolish against my skin, a costume for a play that might have no audience. The silence, once filled with his textual presence, now felt hollow and accusing. I needed proof, not of his feelings, but of his existence. The digital world was too malleable. Too full of beautiful ghosts. I needed to see him breathe. The next morning, my message was uncharacteristically blunt. It felt like throwing a rock through a stained glass window. James. I need to see you, a proper video call, not just pictures. I need to hear your voice. I sent it and braced for hurt, for defensiveness, for the delicate fantasy to shatter into a million glittering fake pieces. His reply came within minutes. It was not defensive. It overflowed with warmth and what felt like relief. My dearest Eleanor, of course, I've wanted this for so long, to see your eyes light up in real time, to hear the melody of your laugh. Let's do it tonight. PM your time. I'll be waiting, my love. My relief was a tidal wave, so intense it felt like weakness. I spent the day in a nervous, giddy flutter. I tried on 3 different sweaters. I fussed with my hair. I positioned my laptop on the desk, adjusting the angle a dozen times, checking the light. I was a girl before her first prom, my stomach a riot of antique butterflies. At 7:58 p.m., I sat down, smoothing the silk over my knees. My hands were clasped so tight the knuckles were white. Precisely at 8, the notification bloomed on my screen. James Landry is inviting you to a video call. I inhaled a shaky breath and clicked accept. The screen resolved from a blur into a perfect, heartbreaking clarity. And there he was. He was exactly as pictured, but more. He sat in a leather wingback chair, a wall of serious-looking books behind him. He wore a crisp, cornflower blue shirt, open at the collar. His hair was a handsome, silver, neatly combed. His face was kind, lined in ways that spoke of a life of smiles and thought. He was real, flesh and blood and light made in 2 pixels. James, I breathed, my voice a trembling whisper of pure, unadulterated joy. He smiled, a warm, affectionate, utterly perfect smile. His eyes, kind, crinkled at the corners, seemed to look directly into mine, twinkling with recognition and delight. He gave a small, happy shake of his head, as if marveling at the sight of me. His lips moved slightly, forming a silent word that looked like beautiful, but no. Sound came, James. Can you hear me? I asked, leaning closer to the screen, my heart beginning to stutter. He continued to smile, tilting his head as if listening intently to something precious. He raised a hand in a gentle, familiar wave. His mouth moved again, you. But my speakers offered only dead, hollow air. For 6 seconds, I was immersed in him. I saw the individual strands of his silver hair, the subtle pattern of his shirt, the genuine, affectionate warmth in his expression. It was a perfect frozen snapshot of reality. Then abruptly, the call failed. The screen flashed back to my own, wide-eyed, hopeful reflection. A text bubble appeared from him instantly. Darling, my connection here is terrible. This old Boston brownstone, the walls might as well be made of lead, but seeing you, even for a moment, you are radiant, more beautiful than I ever imagined. You've made me the happiest man. The doubt didn't just vanish. It was incinerated in the white-hot furnace of my relief and joy. He was real. I had seen him. The subtle flicker of his expression, the life in his eyes, the slight movement of his face that couldn't be faked. The technical glitch was just that, a trivial, worldly inconvenience that only made our fleeting connection more poignant, more precious. It was you, I typed back, tears of happiness blurring. The screen, it was really you, it was me, my love, and soon it will be me in person. This just proves it's meant to be. The world can try to keep us apart, but it won't succeed. Now, about that future we're building. The 6-second proof was the final, unbreakable seal. He was no longer a silhouette, a collection of perfect texts, a voice in the dark. He was a man in a blue shirt, smiling at me from a room full of books, his eyes saying everything his frozen lips could not. The seed of the idea he'd planted was now buried under the bedrock of absolute, unshakable faith. I had seen his face, and in that beloved, proof positive face, I saw my entire future, smiling back, tending the digital garden with the 6-second smile etched like a sacred icon in my mind. A new and thrilling chapter began. The seed James had planted was no longer just an idea. It was a living thing, and I approached it not with the trepidation of a novice, but with the reverent focus of a gardener entrusted with a rare, precious bulb. This was no longer just an investment. It was our project, a shared endeavor, as intimate in its way as our whispered digital confessions, a secret we were building together. He guided me with a surgeon's steady precision and a lover's gentle encouragement. The link he sent wasn't to some blinking, garish website. It was to a platform called Aria Vault. The name sounded solid, classical. The logo was a single, stylized golden oak leaf. The interface was clean, minimalist, serene. It felt less like a trading floor and more like the private library of a very discreet, very modern bank. It felt safe. Start small, my heart, he advised, his words appearing on my screen like a personal scripture. Think of it as planting an acorn. No one expects a mighty oak in a day. Just put in what you'd spend on a nice dinner out. Let's watch it grow together, side by side. The metaphor rooted itself deep in my soul. After a lifetime of Frank's pragmatic spreadsheets, this felt creative, almost alchemical. I linked my everyday savings account, the one with a few $1,000s for groceries and the unexpected, and with a breath held tight in my chest, transferred $500. The process was smooth, silent, professional. My new dashboard appeared. A single, elegant number, $500.0. Below it, a line graph, flat and calm. For 3 days, it became my new morning ritual. After my tea, before even looking for his good morning, my love, I would log into Aria Vault. The first day, nothing. The second, a tiny, almost imperceptible green uptick, $502.5, a quiet thrill. On the third morning, I clicked the refresh button and my hand flew to my mouth, $712.18. A jolt, bright and electric, shot through me. It wasn't about the money, it was the validation. James had been right. I did have the discernment. I could understand this. I could do this. It was a language I could learn. With trembling fingers, I screenshotted the dashboard and sent it to him. His response was a symphony of proud, tender encouragement. See? I knew it. You have a natural eye for this. That's a nearly 50% gain in 72 hours. Imagine the potential when we apply this to more substantial capital. But no pressure, my love. One step at a time. Your comfort is everything. Substantial capital. The words hung in the air of my den, glowing with promise. My financial advisor, Mr. Brennan, a man whose voice could make even good news sound dire, had my retirement funds locked in bonds and sleepy mutual funds. They earned a drowsy 2-3 a year. If that, in 3 days, I had made over 40%. The math was not just seductive. It was an irrefutable, gleaming truth. With James's calm, sure voice in my ear figuratively, through his texts I authorized a transfer of $10,000 from my money market account. It felt like a leap, but the safety net of his belief and my own proven, initial success was woven beneath me. I watched, mesmerized, as the line on my graph began a slow, steady, beautiful climb. It became a living thing, a shared heartbeat on a screen. Our digital child, I'd message him updates with the giddiness of a new mother. It's at $12,400. He'd reply, the market favors the patient and the wise. You are both my Eleanor. I never once clicked the withdraw button. The thought felt crude, sacrilegious. Why would I? This wasn't about extracting cash. It was about cultivation. We were tending our digital garden, watching our shared future compound, leaf by golden leaf. Withdrawing felt like uprooting a seedling just as it broke through the soil. The number on the screen was not money to be spent. It was a promise materializing. It was the down payment on the Tuscan villa, the first-class tickets, the long, worry-free sunset years where our only concern would be which wine to pair with the evening light. My daily routine transformed utterly. The ghost in the armchair was a forgotten relic. My first and last communion of the day was with the soft green glow of the Aurea Vault dashboard. The rising line was a physical manifestation of James's love for me. He was guiding me to security, to freedom, to us. Each uptick felt like a secret kiss, a shared triumph over the mundane, stagnant world of CDs and cautious advice. I was no longer Eleanor, the waiting woman. I was Eleanor, the savvy investor. Eleanor, the partner in a brilliant modern enterprise. The golden mirage, the line on the graph, stopped climbing and began to soar. It became a mesmerizing, private spectacle, a silent, golden fireworks display that only I could see, the initial $15. 000 felt like laying a cornerstone. Now, under James's steady, confident guidance, we were building a castle upon it. His advice was always perfectly pitched, never greedy, always framed as prudent strategy. Diversification is the soul of wisdom, my Eleanor, he'd write. Let's not keep all our acorns in one basket. I've been studying a new token with tremendous potential. It's like discovering a rare, wild orchid. The metaphor, as always, spoke directly to my heart. I wasn't gambling. I was a botanical collector of financial flora, cultivating a wonderland of prosperity. I ventured deeper. The $25,000 from a matured certificate of deposit was next. Then a bold, exhilarating leap, $40,000 from a conservative bond fund I liquidated. I could almost hear the phantom, disapproving cluck of my advisor, Mr. Brennan. I silenced it. Mr. Brennan dealt in the dusty arithmetic of fear. James dealt in the vibrant calculus of faith, of our future. Each transfer became a sacrament of trust. I'd inform him, my messages tinged with nervous excitement. I've moved another 40 into the Aurea Vault. His replies were a balm and a catalyst. Your courage continues to inspire me. This is for us, for our peace. Just watch. And I would watch. The Aurea Vault dashboard became my theater, my chapel. The numbers didn't just change. They danced, they swelled in a silent, glorious ballet. The line graph took on a steep, beautiful curve like the neck of a soaring swan. My total investment climbed, a snowball turning into an avalanche of potential $80,000. I lived in a state of quiet, constant euphoria. I'd walk to the mailbox, and as I sorted through the bland envelopes, my mind would drift to the dashboard. It's probably at $300,000 by now, I'd think, a secret, victorious smile playing on my lips. The world outside took on a sharper, more beautiful hue because I was no longer its anxious prisoner. I was a woman with a golden secret, a key to a future shimmering just beyond the horizon, a future I was actively forging with the man I loved. Finally, after what felt like both an instant and a lifetime, I made my last, largest transfer. It was the remainder of my accessible retirement fund, the final chunk of the cushion Frank had always insisted we maintain the just-in-case money. There was no just-in-case anymore. There was only because we can. The numbers on. The screen settled, breathtaking in their totality. Total investment, $380,000.0, current value, $759,842.16. I stared. The digits seemed to pulse with a light of their own, illuminating my rapt face in the dark den. $750,000, almost double, in a matter of months. A soft, incredulous laugh escaped me, a sound of pure triumph in the silent house. It was real. It was all real. James's love, his wisdom, our shared vision, it had all coalesced into this perfect, shining number. This was the alchemy he had promised. I took a screenshot, my fingers trembling not with fear but with awe. This wasn't for James. This was for me, a monument to my own late-blooming courage, to the defiant spark that had refused to die. This money was no longer just a means to an end. It was the physical, digital proof of my transformation. It was the solid ground beneath the beautiful dream. I glanced at the withdraw button, a small neutral icon I had never once been tempted to click. There was no urgency. Withdrawing now would be vulgar. It would be like tearing a masterpiece from the wall to sell it before the exhibition had even opened. The money was safe, growing, working for us inside the elegant, secure walls of Aria Vault. It was our nest egg, already hatched and preening with gorgeous golden feathers. I leaned back in my chair, the blue silk robe whispering around me. The silence of the house was no longer empty or accusing. It was the serene, pregnant silence of a wish fulfilled, a prayer answered. The ghost in the armchair was now just a piece of furniture, a relic from a previous life. The future was no longer a blank canvas. It was a detailed, gilded painting, and I was already in it. I could see James and me, hand in hand, bathed in the warm, golden light of $759,842.16. It wasn't just wealth, it was vindication, it was freedom, it was love made manifest in the most modern, miraculous way. It was our glorious autumn, and it was already here. The first crack, the click of the mouse, was meant to be a culmination, a graceful, satisfying period at the end of a long and beautiful sentence. That morning I'd felt so light, so sure. I'd even done something whimsical. I'd sketched on a notepad. Not numbers, but scenes. A terrace drenched in Tuscan sun, 2 chairs facing the sea, a shared breakfast tray. I was designing the stage for our life. Now it was time to bring the first piece of the set from the digital world into the real one. With a heart full of serene certainty, I logged into Aria Vault. The screen dissolved into the elegant, spinning hourglass I'd seen 100 times before. It refreshed. But instead of a simple form to input my bank details, a new message box appeared. It was framed in a tasteful, non-alarming shade of taupe: withdrawal request. Initiated to ensure the security of your assets and comply with international anti-fraud regulations. A one-time verification fee is required to process this transaction. This fee is 20% of the requested withdrawal amount and will be fully reinvested into your portfolio upon successful clearance. A number was auto-populated below in a calm, sans serif font: $151,968.43. I blinked. I read it again. The serene smile froze on my face, then slowly melted away, leaving my skin cold. A verification fee, 20%. James had never mentioned a fee. The platform's FAQs, which I'd skimmed with such hope months ago, spoke of transparency, of low, predictable costs. This was neither transparent nor low. It was a mountain. A cold, tiny drop of dread formed in the pit of my stomach. My fingers, suddenly clumsy and alien, typed a message to James. Darling, I tried to make a withdrawal. It's asking for a huge verification fee, 20%. Is this normal? It seems exorbitant. I sent it and waited. The silence from his end was a physical weight. The cheerful chime I'd loved was now a torturer's tool. 5 minutes, 10. Finally, his reply bubble appeared. It was slower than usual. My love, don't be alarmed. I should have warned you. Yes, it's completely standard for a first-time withdrawal of this magnitude. It's a security protocol Aria Vault uses to prevent money laundering. Think of it as the final protective wall around our garden. Once it's paid, the gate swings open forever. It's a one-time thing. I'm so sorry it startled you. The cold drop of dread didn't disappear. It spread, a slow, icy trickle through my veins. $151,000. It was an impossible sum for a fee. It was more than most people made in years. I typed back, the tremor in my hands translating to the keys. But that's so much money, James. I don't have that kind of liquidity. Everything is in here. His response this time was swift, a voice of unshakable reason. I understand, my heart. It feels like a lot, but look at it this way: it's 20% of your gains, not your principal. You're still hundreds of thousands ahead, and once it's done, every penny of that 7-figure sum is yours to access anytime. It's the last hurdle, the final lock to unpick before our future is completely, irrevocably ours. Our future. The words were a hook pulling against the dead weight of my fear. I looked from his calming text to the daunting number on the dashboard. The fee, as he said, was just a portion of the spectacular profit we had made together. It was a bureaucratic formality, a final test of my trust in the system and in him, a test of my courage. But the money, I had no more cash. My savings accounts were drained. The thought of asking James for it was unthinkable. It would shatter the careful equality of our partnership, turn me from a savvy partner into a needy burden. A panicked claustrophobia closed in. The golden mirage was still there, shimmering on the other side of the glass, but the price of admission was everything I had left in the tangible world. My desperate eyes swept the room, searching for an answer, and landed on a small framed photograph on the bookshelf. The lake house. Frank, younger, grinning with a sunfish he'd just caught. Me, laughing beside him, squinting in the sun. For my Eleanor who loves the water. The cold trickle in my veins hardened into a knot of grim, desperate resolution. The cabin was an artifact, a monument to a ghost. James and the future were alive, pulsating. Right there on the screen, the ghost could finance the reality. It was a brutal, heartbreaking calculus, but in my panic, it made a terrible, twisted sense. I was not losing a cabin. I was investing in my freedom. I was trading a memory of happiness for its active, living creation. With hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, I picked up the phone, not to text James, but to call a realtor. My voice, when I spoke, was eerily calm, detached from the storm inside me. "Susan, it's Eleanor Tillman. I've decided to sell the lake property. Yes, as quickly as you can." As I hung up, I looked back at the Aurea Vault screen at the demand for $151,968.43. The first crack had appeared in my golden dream, a fine hairline fracture in the perfect surface, and in an act of profound, hopeful betrayal, I began to pour the last sacred relic of my past into it, praying with every fractured piece of my heart that it would be enough to seal the crack, to make the dream whole again, the price of a ghost. The sale of the cabin was a swift, clinical amputation. Susan, the realtor, was a whirlwind of cheerful efficiency, her chatter about unprecedented market demand and seller-friendly terms a stark, soulless soundtrack to the dismantling of a sanctuary. I signed the papers at my own kitchen table, the pen feeling like a scalpel. The day the for sale sign plunged into the soft earth by the driveway, I turned the photograph of Frank and his sunfish face down on the shelf. When the wire transfer hit my account a number so large it felt both meaningless and monstrous, I didn't allow myself to think. Thinking would lead to picturing Frank's proud, quiet smile as he'd handed me the deed on our 20th anniversary. Thinking would lead to imagining strangers sleeping in the butter-yellow bedroom where my children had spent every summer of their childhoods, so I didn't think, I acted. Logging into Aurea Vault now felt different. The elegant interface seemed colder, the golden oak leaf logo less a symbol of growth and more like a branded seal on a contract. My heart hammered a frantic, sick rhythm against my ribs as I initiated the transfer of $151,968.43 from my checking account to the verification fee address provided. The confirmation screen spun. A green check mark appeared, accompanied by a single blissful word: successful. A wave of nauseating relief washed over me, so intense it left me lightheaded. It was done. The final lock was unpicked. The last protective wall had been scaled. I had paid the price. Now the gates to our garden would swing open, and I would step into the golden future. Without pausing, I navigated back to the withdrawal page. I would start small, I decided, a test, a token of our success. Enough to perhaps buy a bottle of champagne for when James arrived, to toast our brilliance. I entered $5,000 and clicked submit. The elegant hourglass spun and spun. Then it vanished. A new message box popped up, this one bordered in a soft, apologetic blue. Transaction pending, alert, further compliance review required. To finalize withdrawal and release all funds, a final anti-money laundering AML and international wire tax clearance fee must be settled. This one-time fee is 15% of total portfolio value. A new number glared at me from the screen, bold and immutable: $113,976.32. The nauseating relief curdled instantly into pure, unadulterated terror. It was a bottomless pit, a mouth that kept opening wider, hungrier. My breath came in short, ragged gasps that didn't seem to reach my lungs. I frantically screenshotted the screen, my fingers slipping on the keys, and sent it to James. My message was a raw, digital scream: "James, it's asking for more, another $114,000. What is happening? I have nothing left. I sold the cabin." I stared at the screen, waiting for the balm of his voice, for the calm, logical explanation that would make this new, impossible demand dissolve into sense. The minutes ticked by, each one a lifetime. The silence from his end was louder than any siren. Finally, a bubble appeared. My heart leapt, a dying fish on a dock, but the message was not long, not reassuring. It was curt, distant. "Eleanor, please don't panic. This is standard for wires of this size crossing international borders. I'm looking into it. It's the last step, I promise. We're so close." We're so close. The words felt hollow. A recorded message played from a great distance. Don't panic. I was far beyond panic. I was in the free fall of utter ruin. I had sold Frank's last, tangible love, poured every liquid cent of my security into this digital chasm, and it was still not enough. The golden number on the dashboard now looked like a taunt, a fictional sum in a fictional kingdom that demanded ever more real-world sacrifice for entry. It was a beautiful, hungry ghost. I had no more properties, no more CDs, no more cushion. I was staring into the abyss of having literally nothing but the clothes in my closet and the hollow house around me. The ghost of Frank felt suddenly, violently present not in the armchair, but in the echo of his prudent, protective voice. Always keep a cushion, Ellie, for emergencies. I had not just spent the cushion. I had sold the floor from under my own feet. In the suffocating silence, a final, desperate impulse took hold. I needed a lifeline, not from the digital phantom who was fading before my eyes, but from the solid, real world. With trembling fingers that felt thick and useless, I picked up my old cordless phone and dialed the one person who had known me since before I was Eleanor. Tillman. Marge? I said, my voice a thin, cracked whisper, the sound of someone standing on a ledge. It's me. I need to ask you for something. I need your help. The confession, the admission of this cataclysmic, shameful need was the true price. It was the moment the last of my dignity, the last vestige of the capable, discerning woman I thought I'd become, was laid on the altar. I had paid for the ghost of a future with the ghost of my past, and now I was begging for scraps to try and buy my way out of the nightmare. The price was everything, and as Marge's worried, "What is it, honey?" came through the line, I knew with a cold, dead certainty that it still wouldn't be enough. The shattering Marge's voice on the other end of the line was instantly professionally calm. It was her nurse's voice, the one she used before delivering difficult news. "Eleanor, take a breath. Now, slowly, what do you need $25,000 for?" The dam, already strained to splintering, broke completely. The story, held back by shame and the fragile scaffolding of my dream, tumbled out in a chaotic, wet torrent. I spoke of James, his kindness, his patience, the 6-second video call that had been my bedrock. I gushed about Aurea Vault, the beautiful climbing numbers, the golden future. My voice hitched and soared, a pathetic roller coaster of hope and fear as I described the verification fee, the sale of the cabin, and now this new, impossible tax clearance. "He says it's the last step, Marge, he promises, but I have nothing left to give. I just need to bridge this final gap, and then it's all there, all of it, almost $1 million, and I can pay you back 10 times over." I trailed off, hearing the frantic, manic hope in my own voice. It was the sound of someone clinging to a cliff edge by a thread of spider silk. The silence from Marge was different this time. It wasn't the quiet of listening. It was the dead, airless silence of dread. "Eleanor," Marge finally said, and her tone was so gentle it was worse than a shout. It was the voice used at hospital bedsides when the scans come back. "Honey, oh my sweet dear friend, you have to stop right now." "What?" "No, you don't understand. I do understand." Marge's voice broke, just a little, a crack in her professional calm that let the sheer devastation pour through. "I understand perfectly. Eleanor, you are being scammed. This is a classic romance scam. The crypto site is fake. It's all fake." The words were not words, they were physical blows. I actually recoiled, the phone slipping in my sweaty palm. The den seemed to tilt, the walls warping. "No, that's not possible. I saw him, Marge, on a video call. He smiled at me." "AI," Marge said, the 2 letters a death knell. "Deep fakes, they can do that now. They can make a person on a screen smile and move for a few seconds. It's a recording or a generated image. It's not real." The world did not crack. It disintegrated. The living room walls seemed to dissolve into pixels, just like the smiling man had. The beautiful golden dashboard glowing on my laptop now looked like a neon-lit tombstone. The 6-second smile, the bedrock of my faith, the proof that had cost me everything, was revealed as a cheap digital trick, a puppet's grin. On a pre-recorded loop, my stomach lurched, but the money, it grew. I whispered, the last pathetic defense of a shattered mind. "It's a show, Ellie," she said, her voice thick with tears for me. "They control the numbers. They let you see massive gains to hook you, to make you invest more. The money you sent was stolen the second it left your account." Each sentence was a shovelful of dirt on the grave of my hope. The future, the Tuscan terrace, the shared silences, the profound comfort of skin evaporated, leaving a howling, radioactive void. But worse than the loss of the dream was the annihilation of the love. James's tender words, his patient guidance, his at my silk-robed reflection. All of it was a script, a calculated psychological performance designed to map the lonely, aching contours of my heart and exploit them with surgical precision. I had not been loved. I had been researched. My loneliness had been my most attractive feature. A sound escaped me, a raw, animal gasp that was the death rattle of my dignity. I had poured my loneliness, my resilient hope, my late-life bravery into a void. I had sent a sexy picture to a stranger who had likely laughed with his criminal cohorts. I had sold Frank's cabin, my last tangible tether to a true, if quiet, love to feed. A fantasy. I had offered my intellect, my discernment, and he had used it as a lever to pry me open. Oh God, I moaned, doubling over as if gut-punched, the cordless phone falling to the carpet with a dull thud. The cabin, Frank's cabin. I'm so sorry, Marge whispered, and now she was crying openly, the sound of her grief for me a distant echo in the receiver on the floor. I'm coming over, right now. Don't do anything. Don't. Send another cent, just breathe, but breathing was impossible. The air had turned to glass dust. I stared at the laptop at the beautiful lying graph. I had built a palace on a cloud, furnished it with dreams, and now I was in freefall, watching it recede above me, perfect and unattainable. The shattering was complete. All that was left were the jagged, piercing shards of truth, cutting me from the inside out. I was not a woman in her glorious autumn. I was a cautionary tale, a fool. In a silent, empty house, financially gutted and utterly, devastatingly alone. The love of my life had been a ghost with a bank account. And he had taken everything, including the last shred of the woman I thought I'd rediscovered. The gray checkmark Marge's words were a diagnosis of a terminal illness, but the silence from James was the confirmation. In the raw, gasping hours after the shattering, a primal, wounded part of my brain refused to fully capitulate. Marge could be wrong. Marge was from the old world, skeptical, protective. There had to be a mistake, a terrible but fixable bureaucratic knot at Aria Vault. James would cut through it. He would explain. He would make it right. Clutching at this last, disintegrating reed, I went to my laptop. My fingers, icily numb, navigated away from the cursed dashboard to our messaging app. The history with James was a leather-bound novel of intimacy. I scrolled past the peonies, past the discussions of Sibelius, past the sweet nothings that now curdled in my stomach like spoiled milk. I clicked to compose a new message. My first attempt was frantic, a child's cry in the dark. James, something is terribly wrong. The platform is demanding more money. I spoke to a friend and she said things I don't want to believe. Please call me. Please just call my phone and explain. I'm scared. I hit send. The message showed a single gray checkmark. Sent, not delivered. A chill, deeper than any I'd felt before, seeped into my bones. He was gone, already gone. I typed again, slower now, appealing to the persona he had crafted with such care. James, my love, I need to hear your voice. This is a nightmare. I sold my property. I have nothing. You promised me we were safe. You promised. 2 gray check marks. Delivered. Read. He had seen it. He knew I was in free fall. Terrified, ruined, and he said nothing. The ghost, now stripped of its beautiful, loving mask, was revealing its true, hollow face. A fury born of utter humiliation rose in me, hot and acid. I typed again, my fingers striking the keys like little hammers. Who are you? Was any of it real? Answer me. Delivered, read, silence. A silence more profound than any in my house. It was the silence of a void. Tears of rage and utter despair finally broke, streaming down my face, dripping onto the keyboard with soft, pathetic taps. I went to the gallery of images he had sent, the peonies, the delphiniums, the wisteria. Symbols of a courtship that had never existed, digital weeds in a fabricated garden. With a sob that tore from a place deeper than my throat, I sent the very first picture he had ever given me. The lush, perfect peonies, the caption he had written, "For your glorious autumn." I sent it back to him with no words of my own, just his. Beautiful, lying image. For a long moment, nothing. Then the 2 gray check marks appeared. Delivered, read. And then beneath them a change so small, so devastatingly final, it stole the last breath from my lungs. The 2 check marks remained, but the faint telltale outline that indicated read vanished. He had toggled a setting, read receipts off. He had not just ignored me, he had formally, technically erased the proof of his presence. He had withdrawn the very evidence that he had ever witnessed my collapse. The gray check marks were his goodbye, not a word, not an excuse. A digital setting adjusted, a ghost deleting its own footprints in the sand. I stared at the unfeeling gray symbols. They were the truest message he had ever sent. They said, "You are nothing. Your pain is nothing. The performance is over. The curtain is drawn." All the beautiful words evaporated, leaving only the sterile, ruthless architecture. Of the scam, the 6-second video was a file on a computer. The flowers were stolen images from a stock photo site. The promises were empty lines in a script, likely copied and pasted for other Eleanors in other silent houses. The love was a weapon, and it had been aimed perfectly. I closed the messaging app. The screen went dark, reflecting my own ravaged face, a woman in a blue silk robe that now felt like a clowness costume, a grotesque parody of sensuality. The ghost in the armchair had been a memory, a companion of sorts. This new ghost, the one conjured by James, was a vampire. It had not haunted me. It had fed on me, siphoned my life, my hope, my security, and then when I was drained, it had simply switched off a notification and ceased to be. The silence in the room was no longer polished or anticipatory. It was the silence of a vault after the thief has left, the safe empty, the door hanging open. It was the silence of absolute, engineered absence. The gray check marks were the period at the end of the sentence, the period at the end of my story. All that remained was the hollowed woman and the echo of a love song that had been, from its very first note, a funeral dirge played for my own foolish, trusting heart. The hollowed present the blue silk robe, once a symbol of reclamation, now felt like a shroud. I did not remove it. It was a penance. I moved through the house like a sleepwalker, my bare feet whispering against the hardwood floors Frank had polished every Saturday for 30 years. The silence was no longer a presence. It was an absence so complete it had its own mass, its own gravitational pull, threatening to collapse me inwards. I bypassed the desk. The laptop was closed, a black slab of tombstone. I bypassed the armchair. The ghost of Frank there seemed a gentle, distant spirit compared to the vicious, engineered phantom that had just vaporized. I went instead to the cold kitchen, but the sight of the single mug in the drain board, the one ID used for my morning tea before the world ended, made my stomach turn. I stood in the center of the living room, adrift in a sea of my own possessions, and realized I owned nothing. Not really. The money was gone. The cabin was gone. The future was gone. Marge came. She brought soup, which went uneaten. She spoke in soft, practical tones about filing reports with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, about freezing my credit, about the long, bleak road of attempting to trace the untraceable. The words were sounds devoid of meaning. They were instructions for rebuilding a house whose very foundation had been proven to be missed. The police officer who came later was kind, but his eyes held the familiar, weary resignation of someone who had seen this script play out 100 times. Romance scam, he said, nodding as I haltingly recited the facts in a flat, dead voice. Crypto investment fraud, they're often combined, the video call. It's sophisticated, but it's usually a pre-recorded loop or a deepfake AI simulation. He said deepfake the way another person might say rain, a common, if unfortunate, phenomenon. Hearing it from him made it finally, irrevocably real in a way Marge's loving sympathy could not. It was a documented crime pattern. I was not a unique tragedy. I was a statistic case file, #. My profound, world-altering love was a common con. The most intimate year of my recent life was a pre-packaged fraud kit. The officer took notes, promised little, and left me with pamphlets titled Protecting Yourself from Financial Exploitation. The irony was a taste liked in on my tongue. Night fell. Marge, seeing the deadness in my eyes, finally left with a promise to return in the morning. Try to sleep, Ellie. Sleep was a foreign country. I sat, in the dark, in Frank's armchair. The leather, once cold, had absorbed the chill of my body. I did not speak to it. There was nothing to say. Frank's ghost was a memory of a true, if quiet, love. James's ghost was a crime scene. My own spirit felt like evidence, bagged and tagged. My mind, in its numbness, replayed not the sweet words, but the architecture of the deception. The timing of his messages, always perfectly spaced to build anticipation. The way he'd mirrored my interests, my language, the very rhythm of my loneliness, the gradual, brilliant introduction of the side project, the flawless 6-second performance, each step a brick in a prison I had willingly walked into, smiling, my heart in my hands, believing I was building a palace. I thought of the cabin, not as a building, but as Frank's hands signing the deed, his quiet pride. Our shared laughter echoing off the water, the smell of pine and lakeweed. I had traded that tangible, sacred history for digits on a screen that had never existed. I had sold a truth to buy a lie. I had auctioned my past to a ghost, and the ghost had taken the money and vanished, leaving me with nothing but the deed to an empty space, where my memory used to live. The hollowing was complete. It was not just my bank accounts that were empty. It was the vessel of myself. The defiant spark that had led me online was not just extinguished. It had been used to light the fuse that blew my life apart. The glorious autumn he'd described was a frozen, barren field. The beauty he'd praised was the gullibility of an old woman. The listener's heart he'd admired was a sucker's ear. I looked around the room at the photographs of my past life. They were like illustrations in a book about someone else. The woman in those pictures believed in things, in vows, in patience, in the slow, sure accumulation of a shared life. That woman was gone. What remained was a hollowed present, a shell occupied by the knowledge that my deepest needs for connection, for respect, for a beautiful ending had been weaponized against me. I had been conned not just of my money, but of my own story. He had rewritten my ending into a cheap, tragic farce. The silence was absolute now. It was the silence after the last note of a beautiful song has faded, only for you to realize the music was never really there. It was just an echo you'd been chasing in an empty room. I had waited for one ghost for years, then I had welcomed another, dressed in the light of my own hope. Now there were only the echoes of my own foolish, trusting heart bouncing off the walls of a house that was no longer a home, but a museum of my own naivete. The final chilling exhibit was myself, sitting in the dark, wrapped in the silk of my own spectacular undoing, waiting for nothing at all. The silence had won, it had eaten. Everything, even the sound of my own weeping. Eleanor's story is a stark reminder that the most sophisticated scams don't target our greed, they target our humanity, our loneliness, our hope, our desire for love and connection in later years. These criminals are patient, they are experts in psychology, and they weave fantasies so convincing they can shatter lives. This isn't just about lost money. It's about stolen trust, eroded dignity, and the profound emotional wreckage left behind. If Eleanor's story moved you or opened your eyes, please like and share it. You might just arm a friend, a parent, a grandparent, or a neighbor with the awareness they need to spot the red flags before it is too late. Let's break the silence and the shame surrounding these crimes. Protect your circle. Subscribe for more vital stories and deep dives into staying safe in the digital age. Knowledge is your best defense. Don't just be aware, be empowered.